Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Battle Bros. Like always, I'm Toxic, and I'm here with the wonderful Savage.
Yep.
Okay, today we're gonna go over what we usually do. We're gonna go over what we've done in the hobby, games, painting, what we've been working on. Then we're gonna go on fluff versus practical, fluff in competition, and then we're gonna go over a list that was sent in to us, and it's kind of on those lines where they wanted to find out. They wanted to go with a fluffy list, but they also wanted something that could be a little bit competitive and not lose every game. So we'll start off with what we've been working on this past week since we've done the last show. So Savage, what have you been working on?
Well, I got my Forge World order for the Storm Eagle, so I put that together, and I've got in my allies for my Imperial Guard, or the Imperial Guard allies for the Chaos. So I started putting that together as well. Just started spray painting and painting, and that's about it so far.
Okay, cool. Well, I haven't really done much in the last week because I've been waiting to restock my paints, but I have finished the Hellbrute commission, and that looks pretty sweet. So there's some pictures of that up on the blog. And as always, contact me if you're interested in getting a commission done. What about games? What games have you played, Savage?
None except for the ones we've been playing online.
Yeah, we've been using the Vassal engine to play some 40k games because we're on different sides of the country, so that's
Well,
something to check out. Yeah, on the world. Sorry. Um, yeah, I was thinking like two different countries, and that's yeah. Um, okay, so yeah, we had what a 500 point game and a 1,000 point game.
yeah.
Yeah, and nothing too exciting with that. We're just mucking around with the Vassal engine, and yeah, that's about it.
Getting used to that, how it works and everything.
Yeah, definitely a great tool for playing games with people that you can't meet in person.
Yeah.
It's never gonna beat it'll never beat the tabletop, and I definitely don't. I wouldn't say just throw away all your models and just go straight to this because you take out half the fun of the hobby.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a kind of a short intro since it's only been about a week since we done the last episode, so I haven't really got much done. Okay, now we're going to move into fluff versus practical. And when we say that, we mean fluff as in lore. So the backstory and the lore that goes with the army versus the practical side, winning games, what you would take that's effective rather than what you would take just because it looks cool and it backs up your story that goes along with your army. Savage, how do you make your army list? Do you go more to the practical side or the fluffy side of it?
I stick to more of like the fluff kind of side, I guess. Like especially with
Yeah.
the World Eaters army, like no sorcerers and just like little things like that. It just make makes the game a little bit more interesting when you play like that. To me,
Yeah, I try to go fluffy. Like I'll have an idea in my head when I make an army list, but at the end of the day, it always comes down to make the list practical to me. I have a Vestroyan army where they use a lot of heavy bolters and plasma guns, and so I take heavy bolters and plasma guns, but instead of stopping there and just saying, well, that's my fluffy part of my army, I'll go on and go, well, how can I make these heavy bolters and plasma guns effective? I'm not just going to give a guy a plasma gun and sit him on foot. I'll give him a Chimera and put him in that so he can, make make that plasma gun more effective. And I think that's what people have to look at when they want to make a practical army list. But that's also fluffy. Is that get your fluff? Start with that because for the most part, the game is visually appealing, and that's how people design their armies. They want stuff that looks cool. So get your fluff sorted, and then once you have that, then go on and make that practical. Would you agree with that?
yeah. So don't just get it because it's in the fluff and not have a good use for it. Like try and figure out some way to use that effectively in your army, so it's still going to be useful to you as well.
Yeah, so like if you wanted to make a Space Marine army that was based around like assault marines and quick fast strikes, you get your you get your main core units that your assault marines, and don't max out on them, but get a big chunk of it so you can tell that that's the fluff of your army, that's the the base of it. Then go through your army list and start throwing out everything that doesn't fit that, that's not fast, hit and run. Get rid of the Vindicators, get rid of, Terminators, and then stick with things like Land Speeders and just units like that. And I think that, and yeah, just get your main idea and then just find units to support that. I think also it's probably important to that every fluffy list isn't going to be the most practical and the most competitive list, and a lot of the time it comes with just practice with that army and just general knowledge of how the game works. You agree?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any thoughts on fluff versus practical?
Um, uh, Not really. Well, like your practical lists are, you probably got if you put a practical list against a fluffy kind of list, of course, the practical list 9 times out of 10 is more likely going to win. But that's just because you're taking the hardest hitting units and just putting them all together, really.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say the practical list would win 9 times out of 10. I would say the competitive
Oh
list
yeah,
is going to win
yeah,
9 times out of 10.
yeah,
And because I think practical is more along the lines of, I have this one weapon, but this weapon is only useful in, X circumstance. So how do I get that circumstance to happen more often? So it's more practical for me to take that in this way.
yeah.
And I think that's how I would look at it. What you say that you are more of a fluffy player. Can you explain more when you're starting a list how you will start looking at making this fluffy list?
I'll probably start off with like just your basic troops or whatever. Find out which one closest matches your fluff, and then next up I'd go to like the HQ or something, find one or you know build up one uh, to make that more towards the fluff that you're going for.
Okay, so for example, you have a pretty decent size World Eaters army, and you. So does that mean that you start with the Khorne Berserkers as your troop?
Yeah, well, I started this in the fifth edition codex as well, so
Fourth edition
oh,
codex.
fourth, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so you could get the Berserkers as troops. So that's where I started.
Khorne Bazookas?
Corn bazookas, yeah. They shoot corn. Yeah. Yeah, so
Okay, sorry.
yeah, getting carried away. Anyway, so yeah, use them as troops, and then got I started with I used to play lots of demon princes in the old one, give them mark of corn and just run them really close combat orientated. Like pretty much most of the army that I have is a close combat orientated one. So yeah, because that's what world eaters are really. They're a in your face kind of army.
But then sixth edition codex, you don't take berserkers or you don't.
Not not as much. Like I in the fourth edition one, I'd take pretty much just a corn berserker heavy list. Now I'd usually take maybe one unit or so of them.
So that's kind of going along the lines of how fluff versus practical, where it's yeah, fluff would be okay. I'm doing a world eaters army, so I'm going to take Khorne berserkers. Like that's my troop choice, and that's what I'm going to take.
Yeah,
But now you're looking at it. Well, is it so practical for me to take those berserkers as all my troops?
yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, so yeah, because like yeah, when I look at building an army, what originally gets me is an idea, and usually it's a fluffy idea. But like I said, I like winning. I think everyone likes winning, some more than others. So I build mine to be more of a the practical, competitive army. So yeah. So is that all we have to say? I think.
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered what we had to say about that.
Okay, so we'll move on to fluff in competition. So fluff in competition. That's the next segment, and we discuss, is there room for fluffy, lore-driven armies in tournaments? And looking at tournaments, usually generally it's the same amount of the same type of armies that win it, and the same type of army codexes. It used to be Razorback spam, and now it's moving on from that with sixth edition. And honestly, I haven't really paid too much attention of tournaments in sixth edition, so I'm a little bit out of the loop. But going from experience, I don't really see too many fluff-driven, lore-based armies, being up there in uh, in tournaments. I mean, I think recently a Ravenwing army got pretty high. I think it might have won a tournament, and I guess you could call that a fluff-based army because it is all Ravenwing. And I think you could go back to the fluff versus practical there and look at that and be like, well, it's a Ravenwing is a fluffy army because you're not taking everything from the Dark Angels Codex. You're just taking the Ravenwing, and you're finding a way to make that practical. On the other hand, I can also look at that and be like, well, Dark Angels are a brand new codex, and a lot of people might say the new codex is always going to be at the top of the tournament scene because they're new codexes. I don't believe in that personally, but that's what people, could say. Now, what do you think on this?
Well, haven't really played much competitively. Like, haven't really played many tournaments or anything, so won't have too much on the topic. But yeah, I can see the fluff be limiting players at some points or another.
Yeah, I think that's the key. The key word is it'll limit you. It limits you what you're going to take. For instance, I played a Thousand Suns player back in fifth edition in a tournament, and he, only had Thousand Suns. He had some Terminators in there, but basically his list was foot slogging, Thousand Suns troop. Now, sure they've got four vulnerable save, they've got AP3 bolters, but they're not a competitive army, and it limits you from what you can take. You can't have that what are they called? Plague. You can't have that unit of Plague Marines to sit on your objective. You can't have that unit of Corn Berserkers for a close combaty punch, and it does limit you. And that's just one example. And I know that that player didn't do too well in that tournament. But it's a hard thing to say because people go to tournaments for different reasons. Some people go to win and just win everything. Some people go to have fun. Some people go to show off the army that they've painted. So it's hard to say that fluff isn't in competitions and in tournaments because people do bring fluffy armies, even if it's just to show off what they've painted. Fluffy armies are always going to have difficulty winning. It doesn't mean that they can't. For instance, I mean, this is a little bit different, but the army that I recently acquired is an Adeptus Mechanicus Tyranid army. Now, that one, I think it was a War Games Con a while back, and granted, it was just a Tyranid list, and yeah, it was just a Tyranid list, but the whole army was converted, and in my opinion, that's a fluff-based army. The whole thing was a big conversion. It was painted nicely, and sure, it was just a Tyranid list, but that won it, and that's another way you can do it. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be a fluffy army in the terms of what you take. It can be a fluffy army in the terms of how you present it and the conversions that you do and the theme behind it. Would you agree with that? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah. Like I agree with that. Like, it's still like a Tyranids list, but it has a story behind it and stuff like that. Like, it's not just made up on the spot. You have a little backstory to it and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
you've got a fluffy law-based army, but you're using a list that can win a tournament.
Yeah,
And I think another thing would be like, for example, let's say you take Grey Knights. Now, Grey Knights have won tournaments. They're a popular army. They're a competitive army. I think you can agree with me there.
yeah,
Um, but then, like, let's say you take Grey Knights and you have an army like this, and it's Grey Knights, but they're pre-Heresy Thousand Sons.
yeah, I do.
Now, would you call that a fluffy law-based army?
Yeah,
Yeah, because you got your Thousand Sons, Scarab Occult, whatever they're called.
yeah,
But you're playing them as Grey Knights, who are a competitive army.
yeah.
You've also got Grey Knights that look like the Custodes, and you know, it's yeah, it depends which way you look at it. I would consider armies that are competitive, but then are a counter as army for something more fluffy. I would consider them a fluff-based, law-driven army,
Yeah,
and they're going to win tournaments if they're a competitive list. So there is room for fluff and competition. It's just how you choose to present it. Are you going to present it as your list and what you take and what units you use, or are you going to hide it? Are you going to hide this competitive list under all this fluff and law?
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, that's the way I see it, and I think most people will agree.
yeah. As long as you've
I
got
hope.
some kind of backstory, like something like that, and then you've converted up your army or something like that to follow with that backstory, but you're still using like a strong, well, not a strong codex, but like a strong list from a codex. I'd still see that as a fluff.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say what's a fluffy law-based list
Yeah, it's
and what's not because I versed a Blood Angels player in a tournament, and he just had a Blood Angels army. It's a Blood Angels army. How can you not say that that's law-based when what he takes is from a Blood Angels codex
yeah,
and he paints it up Blood Angels? It's not the most inventive thing, but how can you say that it's not law-based? And you know, so
it's a
it's hard to say
it's a
because like the best competitive list, be it whatever army, a Grey Knight army that is a competitive list and wins all the tournaments, if it's painted up like Grey Knights, they're using Grey Knight models. Would you consider that a fluffy law-based army?
maybe.
Well, yeah, it's not flashy, but it's painted up like Grey Knights.
Yeah,
It uses Grey Knight units. Why is that? Where is the line between a fluffy law-based army and a competitive army?
yeah, it is fine.
Like where do you see that?
See, that's a hard. I don't. I wouldn't know really, because like,
It's a hard question, but we talk about hard questions. Well, we don't, but this is it. This is a hard question.
yeah, because like, well, you do have like your like Legion codexes and stuff for Space Marines, which pretty much give you like the models already needed and stuff like that. Like, I'd see that as fluff as well. But yeah, I don't know. It's a really fine line to.
Yeah, I think when people say they've when someone comes up to you in a game and they say, "Oh, haha, this is a fluffy army. I don't expect to win," you think, well, you've just taken, units that you think are fun and that this army would use. And I think that's what most people see when they think a fluff-based army. But really, and this is what I think, is that really a fluff-based army is an army that uses the models that army would use and are painted up like that army. Like that is a fluffy army.
Yeah,
It's not, it might not be anything special. And I mean, there is a difference between a competitive list where you're stacking models and you're spamming the same thing and you're only taking something because it's good. Like you're probably not going to see um, an army with, you know, one type of army with, this model spammed 3 times because, lore-wise that unit is rare, then I guess that's kind of where you're drawing the line.
Yeah,
Like, would you see, I don't know, a Space Wolf army with 3 Land Raiders? I don't know. Would you, if it's, I'm drawing a blank here. Would you see a Grey Knight army with, 3 Dread Knights? I don't know. Like, that's where I would see drawing the line is the units that you take.
yeah. Well, it
Would, okay, go ahead.
comes back to like especially with like the Legion codexes and stuff where you get a lot more of the fluff and like the narrative for it. Like you can find out more
You
about like
mean,
the units and
you mean like chapter codexes?
yeah, chat,
Because like
whatever.
Legion, yeah.
Same thing. Yeah, so like you get more
You filthy chaos scum.
whatever.
Go back to your fucking Legion.
Go whatever. Not even
Okay, sorry.
gonna yeah, like you get a lot more narrative in those codexes because it's just based around that one army, so you can find out more about like what units they would use and stuff like that.
Yeah, but like if you had a Thousand Suns army, you're only going from the Chaos book, and Thousand Suns get like 2 models. They get their HQ and they get their troop or their elite, and you're limited to what you can take. And I think that's where it comes
Yeah,
to it. Um, Another thing I was about to say earlier was um, you know, uh, making a fluffy list would be what HQ you take. You can take 2 named character HQs, but would you take that in a fluffy list? Would Manius Calga fight with Lysander? Chances are slim it could happen, but if you're taking a, Imperial Fist army and you just paint Manius Calga yellow, you know, that's not a fluffy army because you've got this yellow ultramarine.
yeah.
So I think we've pretty much got into that as far as we can, unless there's anything else you can think of. I think we've gone past the point of fluff and competition,
Yeah, rack.
but it's a good thing. So what we have next is all the topics that we're actually discussing in this episode have been sent in to us. So if you want to send in something to us so we can discuss, then feel free because we feel a lot better talking about what you want than just talking about what we want. And I feel like you'll enjoy it. So next we have an army list that was sent in with these topics, and it's an army list that is, it wants to be playable and practical, but it also wants to be fluffy. So we'll go into that next. Okay, so this list is 1,500 points. Well, at least that's what we were told. When we actually counted it up, it was a little bit over, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's about just over 100 or
Yeah.
so.
Anyway, the list that we have is an Iron Warriors Chaos army, and the idea is that it's fluffy and practical, and it was just sent in for us to look over, give us our thoughts on it, throw in our 2 cents. So the way we're going to do this is Savage has made his list, and I have made my list, and we'll throw our lists out, pick each other's apart, see what we think, and yeah, see what you guys think. And for the person that sent us their list, then they have some ideas to maybe tinker with their list. Again, feel free to send us your army lists, and we will put that in our episodes. So here we go. Here's the list. It's a Chaos Lord, Terminator Armor, Lightning Claws, Gift of Mutation, Veteran of the Long War. It has 10 Chaos Space Marines, a Las Cannon, a Plasma Pistol on the champion, a Power Fist on the champion, Gift of Mutation, and Melt Bombs also on the champion. It's got a Rhino, Extra Armor, Dozer Blades, Havoc Launcher, and they have Veterans of the Long War. 10 more Chaos Space Marines, Missile Launcher, Plasma Pistol on the champion, Power Fist on the champion, Gift of Mutation, and Melt Bombs on the champion as well. It also has a Rhino, Extra Armor, Dozer Blades, Havoc Launcher, and again, Veterans of the Long War. It has 30 Chaos Cultists with autoguns. It then has a Helldrake. It has 4 Chaos Terminators. It has here a Heavy Flamer. However, you cannot take a Heavy Flamer in a unit of 4. You need to have fifth Terminator to get that. It's got a Chain Fist and 2 sets of Lightning Claws. They also have Veterans of the Long War. We then have a Chaos Land Raider with Havoc launchers and extra armor. Now, I think that's a heavy support choice, even though I do believe the Terminators can actually take one as a transport.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. And then, which doesn't really matter if you don't have 3 heavy support choices, but yeah, just throwing it out there. And the last unit of this army is a Chaos Vindicator with extra armor and a Siege Shield. So Savage, what's your original thoughts on this army, apart from that it was over by some points?
It it wasn't it was a pretty good list. I just found uh, is more.
So you're looking at this from a fluffy or practical right
I was
now?
going for more
Like,
fluff.
like tell us what you think about from a fluff standpoint. How does this list compare to Iron Warriors from the fluff that you have read? I know you're reading one of the Iron Warriors books right now, and I've also read that one. So what does that compare to?
It's it's kind of Iron Warriors, but there's you could add a bit more, as you'll see in my list or hear in my list, that you could add a bit more to make it that bit more Iron Warriors. Like the Terminators really aren't all that fluffy, although I did keep them in my one. Just
Well, I mean, I'm gonna have to disagree there because later on in the book, I don't know if you're up to this, but they have the whole company of Terminators,
okay, well that
and I actually did make an army of just Iron Warriors Terminators from
I remember that.
using the Dark Angels Codex, just because that company is so awesome, and I love that part of the book. But
Yeah,
yeah, but you didn't know that. But anyway, moving on. You kept them anyway.
yeah.
Anything else, Fluffy, that you want to talk about this list?
Um, Not really. Not that I can't discuss once I get into my list. Really.
Okay. What about practical side of it?
Yeah, it's a hard-hitting army. You'd have to, like, as it was a little bit over points, you'd need to drop out something, but it had a counter for every kind of, well, not every kind, but majority of the units that you would see in a game. Like,
Yeah, I think. Oh, okay, go on. Sorry.
oh, no, you go.
Okay, well, yeah, I can agree there. The problem I kind of saw with it practically was things kind of felt a little bit mismatched, and the way I try and even out my points when I'm going for an army, and this might just be because it's a chaos list, but the champions, like the sergeants of the squad, seem to be a little bit overpriced for my liking, and I think practically they were a little bit yeah, too overpriced. But I'll get into that when I do my list. Uh, and Fluffy for me, well, I'll get into that again, but the main things is probably the Helldrake, and I don't know if they would use it or not because I don't know if the Helldrake was even a thought in anyone's head when the books and fluff that I've read were around. So that's it. So you want well let's just jump straight into it because I know that we're going to talk about more fluff and practical um, when we get into our army list. So we'll jump into it and go with your army list. What have you got?
Okay, so we'll start off with the Terminator Lord. He's got,
Yeah, try each unit. Just try and say what you've changed and why. I guess as we go down,
yeah,
just so we don't forget by the time you've read out the whole thing.
yeah, so I gave him a Power Fist and a Combi Flamer. Um, I kept the four Terminators and gave them all Lightning Claws, and the Sergeant with a Power Fist in the Land Raider still. Didn't give any upgrades to the Land Raider. For troops, I have two.
Is there a reason why you didn't give any upgrades to the Land Raider?
Uh, just
Just that you think the Land Raider is already
Yeah,
too much, and from a practical thing, if you shave points off from the Land Raider, then you're gonna get points elsewhere in the army.
yeah,
Is that what you're going for?
yeah. Like a Land Raider is pretty tough as it is, like 14 all around with 4 hull points. So to like give it upgrades unless you're really needing it, you could use the points elsewhere and work that a bit better.
And were the changes that you made in the Terminators and the HQ, was that more of a practical or fluffy side?
Went for more of a practical kind of one because I'd see that unit as like a hard hit, like in the Land Raider, they'd be moving
Oh,
up. Yeah, so they're like the heavy hitting kind of unit. I'd say.
now I don't want to speak too soon, but you haven't taken any marks yet. Is that because you um you don't think it's fluffy, or you don't think it's practical? I mean, I could be speaking soon, and I might see marks later. But what's your initial thought process at this early stage in the army?
Um, well, the Iron Warriors, from what I've read anyway, they're pretty much themselves. They don't give themselves to one god as such. So, there's like a couple of guys in there that, are trying to get in the good books with Corn and stuff like that. But overall, I think they're more trying to be themselves rather than,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, cool. Because I've taken marks in mine, and I've kind of taken them from both. I guess I take them from a practical standpoint first, and then I try to tie them in on a fluff standpoint. And I've read Iron Warriors fluff that, like you said, there's some of them that have basically given themselves over to Khorne so they can fight better. And I see this is just my interpretation of the fluff is that chaos kind of every man is for himself in a way, and that if he thinks that he's going to get higher standing than anyone else, then he will willingly give himself over to a chaos god.
Yeah.
And why they don't have mutations as such, they still use some demon engines and things like that. That was my thought process on going into marks, and I think that's one of the big things that people look at when they going into making an Iron Warriors thing is, do we take marks or not? For me, I think it's okay, and I see it in the fluff that they would take it. But for people like Savage, and I know a lot of other people that don't see Iron Warriors having marks of chaos, so that's a tough one, and I think that's one we're kind of not going to fully agree and disagree on.
Yeah, well, like if you've got the points and stuff, I would probably use them, but there's other things that you could get to make it more Iron Warriors before you get marks and things like that. To me,
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. And the only reason why I've taken marks is because, well, those marks are awesome.
yeah,
They're for the points you spend, you're getting such an awesome upgrade that, in a practical sense of making your list competitive, that's awesome.
yeah,
Have those things. Anyway, let's get back. I mean, it's a talk show. We talk about things, but we're getting a little bit further off from the army list, so let's jump back to that, and then we'll get back to discussing stuff.
okay. So we had the Terminator Lord and the Terminators in the Land Raider. Then moving to the troops, I took 2 squads of 20 cultists, just standard cultists, nothing, no auto guns or anything, just what they got. And then
So just as pistol or a auto pistol
yeah,
or whatever they've got,
yeah,
close combat weapon.
yeah,
Yeah.
auto pistol, close combat weapon. So 2 squads of them. Then I've got um, 2 squads of 10 Marines, both squads having the heavy bolt, taking a heavy bolter, and the sergeants having a power sword.
Okay. Are they in rhinos or are they on foot?
They're on foot. So what I'd use with these is either sit them back, because I did take a defense line as well with I think I gave it a quad gun. Yeah, quad
Yeah.
gun. So either sit them back if you're playing objectives, or move them up but put them behind the cultists, so the cultists act as like a meat shield kind of thing. And then
Oh,
yeah,
continue. No, continue.
yeah.
Because if you're still talking about the troops, just yeah.
Oh yeah, well that's it for the troops. So you got your 2 squads of 20 cultists and 2 squads of
Okay.
10 marines.
You haven't taken rhinos, and this is a thing that a lot of people, when they think Iron Warriors, they think tanks. Do you know something that people wouldn't about them not being on tanks, or is it have you not taken tanks for a more practical? You need the points elsewhere.
A little bit of both. Like the rhinos, they could have used them, but the cultists are there. Like, they,
Okay.
yeah. I just went for
No, no, fair enough, because there's different points in the fluff and in the books of Iron Warriors where sometimes uh you know they'll be on foot doing a little stealth mission up to the wall to check it out. What's the main character of it, like Hanzo or something? Hansu
yeah,
or something?
Honsu.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. He runs a little squad up on foot, and there's other times in it where they'll where he's hanging off the back of a rhino and charging into battle.
yeah,
So I think you can't kind of blind yourself to what you see at face value from Iron Warriors and just spam tanks, because they don't always do that.
no. Well,
So
reading
yeah,
the Horus Heresy Angel Exterminatus as well. The guys on there when they're sieging a place, they'll have like tanks in the back hammering shells,
mhm,
and then the soldiers will run up on foot.
yeah, and I think in the start of one of the Iron Warriors books, they've been like stealthing just in their power armor for days, and then they sneak up on that outpost and just take it out.
Yeah,
So it's not always about brute force.
no.
Anyway, moving on. After your troops.
Okay, so like I said, took the defense line with a quad gun. So you got your like as a more practical one. I saw the quad gun for flyers, defense against flyers, and yeah, like if you've got an objective, you can sit back and
Yeah.
around in there as well. So
Yeah, I pretty much always take a quad gun with the defense line in my list because it's so cheap and it's just so amazing
yeah,
for what it does. And I think it has a double-sided fluff aspect to it for the Iron Warriors, because
yeah,
they do, when they are sieging a fortress,
they set up
they'll
there.
send out cultists so then the enemy will fire at them, fire their artillery at the cultists. The cultists will just get destroyed, wiped out. But then the Iron Warriors know how far the enemy's guns can fire. So then they'll set up trenches just outside the range of fire. So they do sit back in trenches for days, weeks, months as they're sieging. So I think that the quad gun with the defense line kind of, it's a little bit fluffy.
Yeah,
I think you agree that you can kind of, maybe you could model it to be more of a trench, but just the way that it kind of looks already.
yeah, like they do set up their defenses further back and then send the other troops forward as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So next, oh, and just touching on that, is that in sixth edition, I think if you make an army list above 750 points and you don't have something in there that can take down a flyer reliably, I think you might get in trouble in a lot of games.
yeah,
The flyers are just so devastating now, and when you're looking at an army list at 1500 points, what we're looking at here, if you're not putting in uh, a flyer or something to take out flyers, then you could be in trouble. And I think you agree with me on this point, is that in the original list there's a Helldrake, and I assume that it has the Hades autocannon.
well,
I s-
the vector strike can still hit flyers as well.
Yeah, but I mean, I assume that it has the Hades cannon just from looking at it to me, because if that's the anti-flyer that's in that original list, then that's what I want to give it.
Yeah,
I don't want to rely on that vector strike.
yeah, yeah,
But then I don't know if I want to spend that much points on a flyer to take down other flyers. That's just me, but we'll go on to that later. So continue. So yeah, point being, anti-flyers are almost a must in most army lists.
yeah. Okay, so finishing it off, I took 3 Vindicators, all with Warp Flame Gargoyles on them. So that's the last bit of the list. So I'd have them sitting back, just hammering.
Sitting back, they only got a 24-inch range.
Well, yeah, sitting back as far as they can, really.
Okay, so have you taken them? Because I know that Vindicators don't get a lot of love in most lists that I've seen competitively. Do you take them purely because Siege Shields, Vindicators, they're a breaching tank. They're designed to breach walls,
Yeah,
Is that why you're taking them?
yeah,
And you've just maxed them out because, that's the fluff?
yeah, pretty much. They're probably the one of the fluffier lists uh units in the list.
Okay, so uh, you know, tell me if I'm wrong, but the way that I see your army working is, and the way that I see it working in the fluff is that you have this defense line that they're set up. You've got your troops that are sitting there at the defense line or maybe a little bit forward, kind of supporting these vindicators as they slowly roll up the field, just smashing with their ordnance.
Yeah, so yeah, it'd
And
be
that's
like
the
a
kind of
slow moving.
yeah, so that's the kind of idea that you're going with the siege, with the sieging Iron Warriors kind of feel.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Um, and use Warflame gargoyles.
yeah.
You don't think that's a little overkill
Uh,
um
a, l-
on a strength 10 AP2 blast, whatever it is?
a little bit, but then again, I was going for a practical sort of,
Okay.
yeah, feel to it as
Uh, so any last words on your army list
well.
before I go get into mine?
Not really. I think that was, I went into this with the mindset of making, from what I've heard about Iron Warriors so far, fluff wise.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Well, because you've made a fair few changes to the list. I think I've made less changes
yeah.
than you. So
I think I pretty much took the list and just redone it completely. Really.
okay, well I'll get into my list and like always, feel free to jump in at any time and call me out. But so I started off with the Warlord as always, and I went for a Chaos Terminator Lord, just like in the original list. However, I've given it Veterans of the Long War and Gifted Mutation. I mean, I tried to keep with the list as much as I could, and where I've seen that the how the list has been done, um, Gifted Mutation has pretty much been given to anyone that could take it, and it's an awesome trait, and some people just like to have that there, just purely for. And that's kind of something I want to touch on just quickly. I mean, I'm barely into my list and I'm already kind of ranting a bit, but Gift of Mutation for an Iron Warriors army.
Yeah,
I mean, just the name itself, Gift of Mutation.
yeah,
Isn't that kind of breaking fluff right there?
yeah,
But then practically, Gift of Mutation's awesome.
yeah, yeah,
Anyway, so yeah, I tried to keep as close to the original list as I could, just tweaking little bits as I could, um, to make it a little bit more practical in my eyes. Um, Sigil of Corruption, Mark of Corn, because I just think you're putting this list in Land Raider with Terminators. They're probably going to be in close combat. Do I want to pay 10 points for something that's going to give me the edge in close combat? Well, yeah, I do. Fluff wise, I can look at it this way: is that who's saying that secretly my lord doesn't have a little pact going with Korn? You know.
yeah,
Um, the legions of chaos have been disbanded. So who's saying that somehow a little cult of god worshipping guys has made it into my Iron Warriors ranks? That's how I do it. Anyway, so the weapons, I've given him 2 power fists. How do you feel on that? Because I know that's a bit iffy to a lot of people.
yeah. I can see uh, why you've done it because that with the Mark of Corn and yeah,
Well, yeah, but I think it's only 10 points more than having 2 lightning claws,
yeah,
and that's 6 power fist attacks on the charge.
yeah.
Now,
Especially
to me, that's awesome.
yeah. Well, especially when you're gonna have to challenge as well.
Yeah, and okay, I'm a Iron Warriors Lord. I I'm an Iron Warriors Lord. My whole mindset is sieging. What better weapon do I want to have when I'm sieging a building than a fist that's designed to punch through tanks? And I'm having 2 of these. I can walk up to a wall and just start pounding on that wall, and it's gonna crumble. So that's where I went. So next I went with I basically took the 10-man Chaos Marine squad with the las cannon, and yeah, and I gave it a Rhino like the original list. I put a Havoc launcher on it and the Dozer blade because I realized that a lot of these things are personal touches that the person that wrote the list obviously want to keep just because they like they like playing that. So I tried to keep as much of that as I could, but anything that I saw that didn't meet my level of practicality, I trimmed off for more points. For example, my aspiring champions no longer have melter bombs or plasma pistols. In that list, I've given it a las cannon, but I've also given it a flamer because 5 points. How awesome is that D3 snap Overwatch shot
Yeah.
when you get charged?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I figured that squad will just drive up to its objective, hop out, and just kind of snipe tanks with the las cannon. The next squad I kind of redone this squad. It's still a 10-man squad in a Rhino with the Dozer Blade and the Havoc Launcher. However, I have given it two melter guns because the way I see it, why do I have two squads with long range anti tank guns in tanks going forward to objectives? So the way I've kind of done it is one kind of goes to the middle range objective and hops out and las cannons, and then the other one will go up to the furthest objective, to my opponent's objective. So I want to give it these close range, deadly guns on its way. Next, I've taken a defense line too, in place of the Helldrake, just because I don't know if the Helldrake would be too fluffy. In my opinion, I think the defense line is a better choice for anti-flyer, and it's more fluffy. I've kept the Vindicator. I've given it a siege shield, and that's about it. I then have the Terminators, and the Terminators I've given them the Marcus Lanesh. And that's another one of those things where it's like, oh, did you just break fluff there? Well, maybe, but yeah, most of my Terminators will be going at Initiative 5. You know, if I'm going in with these Lightning Claws, then and I'm at Initiative 5, then I kind of want to be getting those AP3 attacks off before other AP Initiative 4 guys are attacking. I've given one guy a Chain Fist just in case, because you never know, and Chain Fists are pretty awesome. And then I've just given the rest of the guys Lightning Claws, and one guy has a Power Sword with a Combi Flamer, just because I noticed that the person did have a Heavy Flamer in there, so I still wanted to give them some sort of flame template when you're running out of that Land Raider. I've stuck with the 30 cultists because that's a pretty awesome unit just to sit on an objective, um, and and just to hide behind the defense wall. Yeah, you got to put something behind there. Well, you don't have to, but you might as well. And they can just sit on your home objectives while the las cannon squad goes to the middle objective, and then the melter squad can go to the furthest objective. And then I've also taken the land raider, and I haven't upgraded that because it's 230 points already. And that's my list. What do you think?
Pretty good. It's all right. Mine's probably better.
It's all right.
Mine.
You think your list is better?
No, probably not. But that's the whole thing. Way that we made our list is you've gone for a more practical kind of list.
Well, I mean, I still see it as fluffy because there's one point in one of the Iron Warriors books where they do this armored assault whereas the company masters get on their rhinos and they drive in, and then you got another one that drives in with Terminators and a Land Raider, and that's when they basically go to siege the fortress. They all jump in their tanks and just zoom off, and that's kind of the idea that I've kind of taken from this original list, and I've kind of made it a little bit fluffy. Maybe I've taken some fluffy things out.
Yeah.
But I've tried to keep on that path of this is them. They get on their tanks and they drive towards the fortress that has already been breached, but they're going for that breach, and that's the kind of idea that I've gone for.
Yeah. Well, you see, with both
Yeah.
our lists as well, we've gone from we we've found a part in a book or a couple of parts from different books that we've liked that's been fluffy, and we've turned that into a list. So they're still both got a lot of fluff. It's just from different from what we've heard, I guess, read.
Well, here's my challenge to you: is that why not? Why don't we? Because we've already mentioned that we've played a couple of games on Vessel. Why don't we bring these armies up on Vessel and we'll go head to head and we'll see who who wins that,
Okay.
and we'll tell the results in the next show.
Yeah.
Okay, so is that about it that you want to go over the list? You don't have anything else to say?
No, I like that list. I like the idea of like the marks and how you make that work in that in the way
Yeah.
that you do. Yeah.
Um, the only thing I want to mention on Iron Warriors list, if personally I was making an Iron Warriors army, is I think I'd add a bit more of the demon engines.
Yeah.
I like demon engines, and I think there's a few fluff parts that I've read where they actually have like these demons in siege tanks and in like these big artillery guns, and they've got a demon in there, and they've literally got chains strapping these artillery guns down because the demon inside is just so restless. And I think that'd be kind of cool to have like a Forge Fiend or a Mauler Fiend.
Yeah, well, the
Yeah,
on the box as well, the Forge Fiend's painted up in Iron Warriors colors. So,
yeah, yeah. So that's something that I would look at as well. Anything that you would say to maybe add to the list that I've made to the original one? Just
yeah, I agree with like the demon engines, like the Forge Fiend and stuff. Maybe even if you're going a bit bigger list, or you wanted to trim down these lists, you add some allies, like some Imperial Guard, going
mhm.
again with like fluff for some more tanks and stuff.
Yeah, get some basilisks in there.
Yeah,
The thing that I kind of want to say to everyone is if you want to make a fluffy army list, if you want to make an Iron Warriors or something, and you want to have a unit that would break the fluff, just don't worry about it. People are going to bitch to you, but people are going to bitch to you no matter what you do.
yeah,
Get that unit that you want and put that in your army and make your own fluff for it. Give it your own, like,
yeah. Make it
just
work.
thing for it. Make it work for you. Like, let's say you want some Thousand Suns in there, and because you like having that AP3 bolsters. Well, who's not to say that there's not an elite unit of Iron Warriors that haven't modified their guns to fire AP3 rounds.
Yeah,
You know, um, do what you want, and that's
yeah,
what it comes down to. If you want a Batten leading your army, then convert up an Iron Warriors looking at Batten.
yeah. You don't have to use the models that Games Workshop puts out for those lists, like the army listing. You could convert some up yourself.
Yeah. So I think we'll move on from that because I think we're probably coming up on a fair bit of time here. But I did ask the Skype Hammer chat recently what if anyone wanted anything for us to discuss, and it was come up lack of Razorbacks and Land Raiders in the Chaos Codex. And when I think they mean Land Raiders, I think they mean the variants of the Land Raiders. So we'll go to that now.
Okay. Okay, so gone a little bit over time, so we're gonna hit this last point quickly in the from the Skype Hammer chat, which was the lack of Razorbacks and Land Raiders in the Chaos Codex. So, from my understanding, it's because they weren't around before during the heresy, so that's why they're not available to the Chaos. Is that what you've heard, Toxic?
Yeah, that's basically the idea. I think they're going for is that like things are also the land speeders, whirlwinds, razorbacks, the variants on the land raiders. I, I think, and what I can understand is that the idea is that they weren't around in the heresy. They're post heresy, units. So that's why Chaos don't have them. But the point that we've talked about, and we've discussed this many of times,
Yeah.
because you've bitched to me about wanting these in your army,
Yeah.
multiple times. And the idea that we have is that, well, just because they weren't around when these things were made and they were discovered, you know, there are armies like Night Lords and just multiple Chaos Warbands that get their weapons, get their armor, get their gear from scavenging Space Marine, chapters
Yeah.
after a fight. They'll scavenge the goods.
Yeah. Or like, they say that Space Marines and stuff go renegade. What's stopping them going
Yeah.
renegade in a Razorback or, you know?
Yeah, so when they go renegade, they just leave. They have to like check off this like checklist. Like rhinos check. Oh, Razorbacks got to leave them behind. Sorry guys. Like
Oh,
where
I can't take my Stormbolt with me. I better leave that at home.
yeah, can't take my Stormbolt. I have to turn that in for a combi bolter.
Yeah.
It, I get that they have to make the two codexes feel different, and I think that's kind of where they're going for.
Yeah.
You can't just make a Space Marine codex with spikes.
Yeah.
but but from a fluffy, realistic standpoint, it makes no sense.
Yeah. We'll see.
If that's the reason why,
Yeah.
maybe the corn. I mean, like maybe corn, doesn't like Razorbacks. Maybe Slanesh doesn't like Wowens. That's why.
But
But
I think it was a little bit worse in the last codex as well, not having those options because you didn't have as much options as what you do now as well. Like you've got like the Helldrake, you've got your Forge Fiend, Mauler Fiend, you've got a lot more different varieties of units now.
yeah,
So
I mean, you can kind of make a Razorback if you give a Havoc launcher to a Rhino, because that weapon it's not a Razorback weapon, but it's still a pretty decent weapon. It's better than a Stormbolter.
yeah,
So now you've got this Rhino with this pretty decent little template weapon that holds 10 guys instead of a Razorback that only holds 6.
yeah,
That's kind of how I looked at it.
yeah. Well, yeah,
Yeah. So because we're going over time, I don't really think we need to touch on that. That's how I did. That's how we see it. Um, so we'll wrap things up again. I'm Toxic.
I'm Savage.
That's Battle Bros. If you have any topics, army lists, anything that you want us to discuss, send it in. We'll have emails, Tumblr links in the description. And I think that's it. Anything that you want to say before we head off?
No, I think that's about it. Hit everything we need to.
Yeah, yeah. Like we hope that you guys are enjoying these episodes because we enjoy doing them.
Yeah,
The idea that we kind of have is that you'll sit back and just listen to them, paint up a mini, assemble a guy, and we'll talk in the background and entertain you while you do that. And that's kind of how we've based it off. We have little pitches to go along with it in case you are happen to be watching. But yeah,
got to keep.
so that's all I want to say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So thanks guys for listening. That was Battle Bros. We'll see you next time on episode 3.